Here we're talking about the Star Trek Enterprise and the focus on was humanity too eager to get too far too fast. I'm joined here today by the usual guys.
Revan, you got to work on your mic, buddy. You're coming in muffled.
About now, am I coming in better now?
Now you're good.
There you go.
Okay, so I'll start again. So we're gathered here today in the presence of God and the law to talk about Star Trek Enterprise. And with humanity too eager to get out of that, for vehicles of America and the government. We're also joined today by two special guests, NB Geeks and Bionic Belly Button, and one of the common man cast, Armchair Warlord. So, let's get this going. CSA, since you brought the stream up, you can start off with your idea. Let's go, bud.
All right. So, who here has seen Enterprise? Star Trek Enterprise?
No. I have.
All right.
I've seen a couple episodes.
Okay. So, just
I have it on DVD.
So basically, just to fill Armchair in on what it is, then it's basically about Earth's first. We'll call it long-range vessel. It's their first Warp 5 starship, and it's all about Earth actually wanting to take a larger role in the galaxy. So they meet the Klingons, the Vulcans, the Tellarites. They meet basically a lot of the primary races, and it's all about like Earth's development. Well, the problem with this show, and it becomes very evident right off the bat, that Earth was nowhere near prepared to enter into the galaxy at large.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I say this is because the NX-01, the Enterprise, that was their only Warp 5 ship. Every ship prior to then was below Warp 5. They were not combat vessels. They were armed, but they were not really combat vessels per se. They were very small ships, and this is all the ships up to the NX.
Do you want me to start showing the pictures?
A little bit. So my thing is this: Earth needed to focus on preparing itself with weapons tech, science tech, shielding, the whole 9 yards before it actually entered into the stage. Because as you watch the show, you notice something that is very clear. They rely on the Vulcans for pretty much everything. Everything. We're trapped, we need the Vulcans. Oh, we're being overwhelmed, we need the Vulcans.
But how would they know?
Hold on a sec. Common Sense America.
Yeah.
You do understand that is not uncommon with how America helps with the Israels.
No, we know that. But
no. But what I'm saying is this: is that I'm not saying you can't rely on others for help, but if you look at Earth's tech, they were maybe on par with the Tellarites in regard to tech. On most races they came up against, they were vastly inferior technology-wise. Vastly inferior.
Okay.
Common Sense America.
Yeah.
Can I?
Okay, BB, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm not very good at timing. I'm sorry.
No, I'm very bad. We need to remember that the Tellarites, whatever their primary government mission was, the Andorians, the Vulcans, everything, the Federation and Starfleet, they were all about exploration. That's why they weren't prepared. Because, and here's why they weren't prepared for it. Because exploration is unpreparable. You can't go from point A to point B and know what's going to happen. Otherwise,
that's exactly what I was going to say. That's exactly what I was going to say.
It's like saying, okay, I'm going to shut up, BB. I guarantee you can say it better than I do.
Well, I was just going to say, how it's like saying that we shouldn't have migrated west on the Oregon Trail unless we knew what we were going to face on the trip and once we got there.
But didn't we though? I mean, because there had
But-
been
No, you did.
No, we didn't.
The Oregon Trail had been explored well prior to anybody settled there.
No, it did not.
Okay.
I mean, the Lewis and Clark expedition, any number of military expeditions out west.
Okay.
It was a fairly well traveled route. It was just
So why can't we say that the
No,
Enterprise
it was
is Lewis
not
and Clark?
a
If you want to go that route with the argument,
No.
somebody had to go
Oregon
first.
Trail was not. Oh, I'm sorry, BB. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm just trying to say somebody had to go first. We would never know that our technology was that unadvanced unless we had gone first and found out what other people had. You don't know you have a small dick unless you look at somebody else's that's bigger, right?
Yeah.
It's the same kind of thing.
Well, yes, but also
Hold
on. NB, let Armstrong talk.
Yes,
well,
sir.
Also, I mean, if you how would I put this? I mean, if you look at exploration on Earth, the people who were exploring were well prepared for what they were getting into. They were capable of getting themselves out of any jam they were going to encounter. This is true almost to a fault. If you look at European explorers throughout the ages, they were very well armed, often had a technological advantage over anybody who was willing to fight, who would be able to fight them. Whereas if they're sort of what you're describing here is the Enterprise going out and not really being able to take care of itself.
That's exactly
go ahead, Emmy.
Because they didn't know. I don't know what the heck you are talking about because you are so out of the element on exploration. You're talking something totally different. Defense is one thing. Offense is one thing. When a military goes and does something, it's a totally different thing. When you're trying to go out and get land, that's a totally different thing because you're going for personal property.
It's not really. There's really very little difference.
Unknown, that's what it is. It's the unknown.
In fact, I mean, if you look at the history of exploration in the New World and so on, it's exactly the same. You had the conquistadors in the New World were not peaceful explorers coming to bring the light of civilization there. They were military expeditions. They were very well armed. They were quite prepared to conquer what they found.
But what we're saying is not the humanity, it's the ship itself. Because CSA was saying to me that there's a few different scenes where they said, oh yeah, the ship left unfinished. The ship itself wasn't finished. And if you notice, throughout the entirety of the show, the ship was constantly being fixed, repaired, stuff like that. There was upgrades being added to it. Yes, I know there was upgrades and things, but I still think that the ship was. If you also look back as well, when Archer was the commander before the NX, they had just broken the warp 2 barrier. There wasn't that many warp ships at all. If any, they were warp 1. Because when Archer was the commander before the NX, there was Marcus, there was the if you remember when he was the commander, when his friend died, that episode, they explained that they had just broken through the warp 2 barrier. I think that Enterprise itself could have stayed and become as strong as the Columbus, but it didn't. It left beforehand.
Oh, the whole thing is.
Hold on.
Remember, this is where I was. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, Revan. I apologize. Let me.
No, CSA was about to talk. Go ahead.
So
hold on.
So and look, I get it. It's hard to compare to a degree the show Enterprise to modern day explorers, because modern day explorers, if you go back to conquistadors for Columbus, they were superior in every facet to any civilization they came across. What I'm saying with in the show Enterprise is this: you have your only Warp 5 ship going out there and exploring, and it leaves. And there's a line in season 1, episode 11, where Archer says, "We left a few weeks ahead of schedule, so the phase cannons were not even installed." And then if you go back, yeah, go ahead and play that clip.
This ship just isn't equipped to handle some of the threats we're coming up against. It's time we do something about that.
What are you suggesting?
Enterprise was fitted with phase cannon ports. But since we left space dock a few weeks ahead of schedule, the cannons were never installed.
So
yes, that was the point. That was one of the points where he realized they left unprepared.
Yeah,
But,
no.
yes, there's no excuse for it. But the truth is, they left unprepared. They did. That's the end all be all. There's no other way to say it.
But
I had a quick question for Armchair Warlord and Common Sense America. Another example, a historical example, and you guys are going to kill me with these historical references because you know a lot more than I do, but what are your thoughts about when the Pilgrims came to America and how the American Indians, or the Indians, helped them? They still came over as conquistadors to take the land. They didn't know they were going to be taking it from anybody, but the people that were here did help them, and then eventually that backfired on them.
Well, yes, they absolutely did. But if you look at the history of like the Massachusetts Bay Company, they frequently did have to use military force to secure their position.
Well, not that. I mean, but the instance that I just brought up about the Pilgrims coming and the Indians helping them, isn't that kind of like the Enterprise coming and then the Vulcans helping them?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's. I mean, I think the analogy to the European colonization, I don't think really holds in the context of Star Trek. But I mean, it's I mean, I guess I do agree with sort of CSA's basic point here that the Enterprise seems to have been, Earth seems to have been very underprepared for what they were going into.
Right, but how would they know what to prepare for if they'd never been there?
Because simply, the Vulcans are out there a lot longer than what they are. And if they had simply said, "Oh yes, this is what you're facing. Here's the Klingon," because remember guys, they had files on everyone that the humans came up against. Because throughout the entirety of the show, they had stated that they are using the Vulcan database. BB doesn't know this. Yeah,
Revan, I think I can answer that question, and it's not going to be a popular one. The Vulcans liked having control and liked having
power. No, that's not unpopular. That is absolutely true. The Vulcans held Earth under
what they were trying to do.
Yeah, but
they were trying to continue influence and power. They controlled the humans for a while, and Archer was one of the few people who was like, and that's why I can relate to Archer, because I was always the guy to buck the system. Hence why I was, very lucky to actually get to retire from the military. By the way, hey, BB.
Mm-hmm.
You said the sweetest thing about my beard. I thought that was so nice of you. I appreciated it. I know I sent you feedback, but now that I actually have a chance to see it in person, thank you. That was so nice of you. I found it very sweet.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad that you liked it.
So, and there's other reasons as to why. Yes, the premise of the Vulcans holding Earth back is granted. Okay, the Vulcans were holding humanity back in certain.
You know what? Oh shit! I'm sorry. I just thought of something. I apologize for interrupting. But when the Admiral was about to die with saving the ambassador, when they said you are you sometimes are like this, you're sometimes like this, and
Yeah, you've
they
got the
said,
ferocity, you've got the logic.
yeah,
1 minute.
it was like, oh shit. It's just now I'm thinking they might really have thought humans were closer to them than any other species, and they were actually scared.
They were
Well,
scared because
they
go
were,
ahead.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
but they were.
because the Vulcans when the it's somewhere in season 4, but the Vulcan ambassador and the admiral are walking and talking, and
That's
basically,
what I'm talking about right
yeah,
there.
the Vulcan
You're
basically,
talking about the same exact thing I'm talking
yeah,
about.
he basically to summarize that whole conversation, he basically says you are like us before we embraced logic. Like you are very emotional. You can be very emotional and logical, but also be like a Klingon where you're just like destroy everything in sight. You're all over the place. And he said that's why you terrify us because you remind us of us before we just embraced logic and
I
threw away our
think
tendencies and emotions.
building on top of that, they're not just scared of us. They've seen the Romulan Empire. They're terrified of us becoming like them.
Um,
And it's completely, and you know what? It is a completely believable possibility.
yeah,
Yeah,
and my reason for saying that Enterprise was unprepared is this. Well, Earth mainly is because you didn't build several NX ships and then say, okay, we're going to take one of them and explore. The the Enterprise was deployed to take the Klingon back to Earth so that way there wasn't war. But why did you have to send an unfinished ship? You have other ships in your fleet. Granted, they are smaller and slower, but you still could have gotten the Klingon there with those while finishing. Because remember, it was either in episode 2 or 3 when they're attacked by that one ship. They didn't even have their torpedo guidance systems tuned yet. They had to literally fire torpedoes at asteroids in an attempt to correct the imbalance in the targeting systems. I mean, again, it's like you go out and you have no weaponry to speak of because you can't
And Common
hit where you're
Sense
targeting.
America, I can answer this very simply. Exploration, just doing something, going into the unknown. It's as simple as opening a door. You don't know what's on the other end unless you've been there before. That's all it is. It's
yeah.
just the unknown. And that is kind of what uh Star Trek that's what Star Trek Enterprise was. It yes. Were they unprepared? Absolutely. Was I unprepared for? But that's a great allegory because think of how many times we were unprepared for the door he opened. Talk about it metaphorically or physically. How many times did we just go through a door and we're unprepared for it? We had to make a choice. We either go through the door or we go the other way and walk away. But it is a wonderful thing to be able to make that choice. And that's the beauty of the unknown. The unknown can be scary, absolutely. But the unknown can also be beautiful and fantastic and romantic. And it's just, you have to take those risks.
But what also this annoyed me throughout the show,
Sorry if I
especially
came off as sappy, Revan.
no. We
Oh,
get
wow.
we get exactly what you were saying, man.
Yeah.
But this is what I did not understand. Why did they only lay down one keel? Because the Enterprise was out there a good 3 years before the Columbia was built. Now the Columbia was built, but they did not have an NX-03 there at all. What I think they should have done is they should have laid down 5, maybe 10 keels at the same time. And then by the time Columbia was built, by the time that the Zindi were there, I know they did not know about the Zindi and they did not know about the impending attack on Earth. But by the time that would have happened, they should have had a fleet of ships and then gone rid of the smaller ships and put the smaller ships' crews on the newer ships. Just replace the ships. Like
Now,
rotate.
so I want to show. So, Revan, start pulling up
Go
some
ahead.
of those. Start pulling up some of those pics. Go with the arrowhead-looking ship first. Okay. So this is one of the ships. This is one of the earliest ships that Earth used. Okay. Now, from what I could tell about this only had 1 or 2 phase cannon ports. Now, some of these numbers, don't go by some of these numbers because I found conflicting numbers. So don't go by all of them. But
CSI?
this is actually called the warp delta. So when you look it up, if you don't look it up by the Triton, you actually look it up by warp delta when you do a Google search for this ship. All right, now pull up the next one, the half saucer section one.
Half saucer.
Yeah, right here, the Intrepid.
Okay.
So remember when Archer came back to Earth after the Xindi test probe hit Earth? How many ships were deployed to defend the NX? You had the 2 warp deltas and the Intrepid right here. That was it. There wasn't like 20 ships, 10 ships. It was 3 ships, and you're within Earth's solar system. That means any ships, like, it wouldn't have taken much for the Suliban to overwhelm Earth at that point, basically, if you only have the NX and 3 other ships.
Yeah. But then at the same time, you also had the Vulcans, which clearly pissed the humans off because they were eager and scratching to get out at the bit. And the Vulcans were like, oh yeah, no matter what it is. The Vulcans had a Warp 7 engine. When they saw how badly humanity was doing with the Warp 5 engine, they could have easily said, hey guys, here's a Warp 7. But we know that the first Warp 7 ship that we know of is the Connie.
Yeah, and here's my thing. I totally get it where I get it. Exploration is something that you don't know, especially if you look at the time Enterprise is based in, okay? I'm not saying Enterprise went to face risks and there went to have been races that were superior. What I'm saying is this. Earth itself, well, yes, Marcus, that's true, but if they were truly protectors, there should have been at least 1 or 2 ships there on Earth, Vulcan ships there. I mean, I'm not saying you need like Surat class or the larger ones, but at least like 1 or 2 smaller ones.
Yeah.
But Earth itself should have actually been ready because, again, if you're going out into the unknown and you meet a race that wants to just be like, oh, you flew into our space, we're gonna annihilate your entire species. Earth would have been defenseless. They wouldn't have lasted any long in a fight.
I have a dumb question.
Yes.
Always, go ahead.
Okay, so what is the time frame of this? Because I looked it up and I thought it was intentionally left ambiguous.
No, the time frame of this is 2156.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like isn't it like 3 years before the Romulan War?
It's 3 years before the Romulan War, which takes place the entire Romulan War takes place before the last episode of Enterprise. So that's the furthest point in Enterprise.
So we're 100 years after the movie First Contact, basically. We're 100 years after that.
Okay. Which actually, I think it was kind of a missed opportunity for them to do another very Star Trek-like exploration show and not tell the story of the Romulan War.
That ticked everyone off, honestly, man. And at this stage, I think all of us who have seen it, and we've seen the reactions to the last episode by the cast, the crew, and everyone, I'm 100% confident that last episode is not actually what happened. It's just a hollow novel.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not sure if any of you guys have ever seen the fan side Starfleet Museum.
No.
I wish.
Oh, it's a Starfleet fan site. It's a Star Trek fan site out there, and actually, the guy who runs it it was put together 20 years ago maybe, but the guy who runs it wrote an entire history of the Romulan War with all kinds of starships, and he figured out the design evolution between very kind of clunky looking Romulan War era ships and up to the original series designs.
Mm-hmm.
And he did this amazing job. And this came out before Enterprise. It's like, why the hell, when fans are clearly doing the best work and have been for a long time, like, why the hell did we end up with what we get?
That's very true.
Yeah.
They just like
because people hire who they know. They hire friends of friends
Yeah.
and people that are the it people and the hot writers that check all the boxes.
But then again, if you also remember, which is an odd timing, the Trip states in the last episode, and I know it's the Hollow novel, but he did state that, oh yeah, Arthur's getting one of those brand new Warp 7 ships. So the Warp 7 came after the Romulan War.
And that's something that for Enterprise, I like to try and flush out and go deeper into shows and the time periods that they're in and what we know of, and it's one of those things where I feel like the writers they tried to make Earth this little insignificant thing that was ready to go out into a larger galaxy, which I'm not saying they shouldn't have. I'm just saying you might want to make sure that the planet to which you're launching from can properly at least defend itself, at least, and has necessary make sure the ship is actually working properly before you leave.
But they were kind of thrown into that situation by having to return the Klingons, right?
They were, but they did not have to send the
No,
Enterprise.
the Vulcans actually wanted to bring the Klingon home, but the humans said, no, we will do it. He crashed on our planet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so by doing that, they launched a ship that wasn't even fully ready to actually enter into the largest of space, and that's where, to me, I feel like the show writers kind of let us down in a way. I feel like by trying to give us
it went out exactly like how it would. It's called exploration. Yes, it did not go the way they wanted. Yes, they survived. They got lucky. The dice rolled their way. Sometimes it didn't. But that's how exploration works.
Did you know that Enterprise never destroyed one ship in its entire fight? Any other ships that were destroyed with Enterprise were always destroyed with the help. Enterprise itself, 1v1, never destroyed a ship.
That's technically not true.
Which one did it destroy?
I think it was the episode Regeneration. They destroyed that ship.
Not about destroying. There's
no. My argument is just this: is that when it comes to Enterprise, as somebody who looks at the show, I get
weren't prepared, right?
They weren't prepared for anything.
Exactly.
And I know,
well, guess what? Nobody's prepared when they go into the unknown.
No, I understand that, but let's say for example, let's say you're gonna hike out in the woods and you take, a hatchet, some lighter fluid. You take all this stuff. If you have a dull hatchet and you have a gun that has no sights on it because the sights were missing and whatnot, don't you think you should make sure that hatchet is sharpened and that gun has proper sights and is properly cleaned and ready to go? Would you take a gun or
no. Actually, you know what I would have done? I would have made sure I had a map that got me all the way through before I'd have to worry about materials.
I wonder if they just add that in, just to try and.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, it's my timing and your timing. I'm just terrible today. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
I was gonna say, what if the writers just added that in as like an extra plot twist to try and keep things more exciting?
Actually, what it was stated as is that I've heard this somewhere, but Enterprise was meant to end up looking more like a proper precursor to the original series. And because we only got 4 series, we've never seen how Enterprise was actually meant to end.
Enterprise ended just what? What do you mean? Enterprise ended just fine.
Enterprise was, I know that, but I'm saying Enterprise was cancelled series 4 when it had 7 seasons planned out.
And Star Trek TOS was canceled season 3.
Yeah.
Don't get bogged down on that.
Anyway,
hold on, see it. AW, you were saying?
Anyways, I guess if I could address your sort of central point, NB Geek, that you came back to multiple times here, that about just regarding sort of how prepared Earth should have been to explore. I mean, the thing was that by that point, Earth was in contact with the Vulcans and had been for some time. They would not have been exploring completely out into the unknown like they were in the Next Generation, where there you see the Enterprise D is an extraordinarily well prepared warship. It's capable of pretty much dealing with anything out there. I mean, that they considering how much more formidable the Vulcans are than anything Earth has in Enterprise. I think it's kind of it's irresponsible almost how underprepared Earth was.
It was, yeah.
Sort of weak the Enterprise is, especially because they knew damn well what was out there. They were very familiar.
They didn't even have a tractor beam. The Vulcans could have given. That was a vital tool that the Vulcans. I know they would about the warp. I get the warp, but the tractor beam, they did not give humanity the tractor beam when they were going out into.
Okay. Wow. I'm gonna say something. No. Can I please sit him?
Go ahead.
You 3 just said something interesting. You actually grabbed something I never thought of. What you guys were talking about just a second ago, I would never have thought about. That's awesome. Thank you. Now,
you're welcome.
Can you explain it to me?
Well, so about I was talking about, like, with the tractor beam. Okay, so they had the maps, they had the star maps and everything that they were hoarding to themselves, right? And humanity was going around filling in their own star maps and everything. Then they had the tractor beam, a vital bit of equipment on every ship that, let's say, we saw them, if a shuttle goes down and gets stuck or something like that, and the Enterprise has to have, they have that stupid tow rope that only goes so far. But the Vulcan ship comes in and beams out and pulls out the shuttlecraft. You would have thought that the Vulcans would have given them that technology, but they didn't. They had all this other technology that the Vulcans were like, oh, humanity is unprepared. But for the technology itself, the Vulcans were stifling humanity.
They were stifling humanity? I thought you said the Vulcans were, because I haven't seen this, I'm quite a disadvantage. I've seen a couple episodes, but...
Well, and that's the thing, is that the Vulcans come in and bail out humanity in sometimes the most simplest of ways, when it's like, look, it's tractor beam technology, which practically every other race has. We're not asking you to give us warp drive technology or shield technology or that. Even just the tractor beam would have been probably one of the most invaluable things that the Enterprise could have used. And then let Earth develop their own offensive and defensive technologies on their own. But if you look at the way, and again, and like Revan said, they weren't truly going out into the unknown. They did have the Vulcan database and star chart, so they already had a map of sorts of kind of what they were going into, and then they would fill in the gaps as they explored further. Mm-hmm. So the fact that they knew who the Klingons were, they did have some technical stats on the Klingons and certain other races. They knew this already. So when you leave space dock because you want to prove a point when your ship can't defend itself, you don't have all the systems fully installed yet, that would be like leaving a car with your transmission only able to get up into second gear. You never
Right.
bothered installing the other 4 or 5 gears.
Right, and that's ridiculous. I see what you're saying there.
And that's my point. I'm not saying Enterprise shouldn't have gone out. What I'm saying is Enterprise shouldn't have gone. Enterprise should never have left space dock until it was ready, and then forcing what Revan said about how Earth should have had multiple keels laid for smaller and NX class ships, so that way they were building up a fleet. Because you can't just rely on the Vulcans to protect you all the time. At some point, you got to defend yourself.
Yeah, and we know that.
They weren't.
And we know that. Yeah, and we know that. Okay, so bionic, the Vulcans at this point were ruled by the High Command. Okay, and the High Command was a severely secretive and bad organization where they wanted to. They were the ones keeping humanity down at this point. And they had said when the humans knew, they didn't know what a Klingon was, although they had access to the Vulcan database. They didn't know what a Klingon was, and the Vulcans said to them, "We didn't think you needed to know." And he's like, "What do you mean? They crashed into our front garden. What did you think? We thought that you did not need to know. We were going to take them back. You didn't need to know it."
So do you think that this is what spurred the human race to
realize?
Absolutely. So that's why they left unprepared, because they seized on the moment. They're like, oh, we finally realized that the Vulcans are keeping us down. They've been withholding other species from us. Now that we have a Klingon of our own, we have a reason to go return them and gain some favor with the Klingon Empire. And so they just, even though they kind of went off half-cocked, but it seemed like it was just an opportunity that they had to seize on because they realized circumstances they were in.
Yeah.
If you frame it that way, then I would have to say to Common Sense America that even though we went off unprepared, it seemed to be one of the best opportunities to further our own exploration and knowledge of the galaxy without relying on it.
They kept saying, maybe if you leave it 100 years, there's actually a line in Enterprise, and someone says, what's 100 years to a Vulcan? Nothing. What's 100 years to a human? It's an entire lifetime. We're not doing that.
Yeah. And the Vulcans were holding them back, and I've said this, once or twice already. I'm not denying any of this. And yes, I get that you needed to prove a point. And again, my thing is this, and the thing is, I'm talking about the overall scope. I'm trying not to get into the tiny, little details of stuff. I'm saying Earth as a whole was truly unprepared. They wanted to prove themselves to the larger galaxy. They wanted to prove themselves. But if you're not ready to prove yourself, then what are you truly trying to prove? We can do this? Great. But we're not ready to bear that weight and responsibility of introducing ourselves. They weren't ready. The NX class could barely hold warp 5 for 10 minutes. Yes, it could go warp 5, but they could barely sustain it, and they risked ripping the ship apart by doing it. Yes. So even warp 5 was emergency of emergency of emergency.
Hey, can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can we get back to positive? Because it seems like it's gone kind of hostile here.
It's not hostile whatsoever, man.
I'm not hostile in any way, shape, or form.
No,
I'm not hostile either.
No. I'm not sure where this is going. Okay.
We're not hostile. We actually love Enterprise.
American idiot.
Yeah, no, I love Enterprise. I like a lot of the ship designs in Enterprise. It's one of my probably more favorited series. I would say, I love Enterprise personally because I love the old school pre-TOS feel of the show. I'm going from a universe perspective. Like I said, thinking about the grand universe of Enterprise and and the scope of everything. And my argument is that Earth was not ready to introduce themselves. They jumped the gun and weren't able to bear the responsibility of jumping that gun, and weren't even playing catch up at that point. They weren't even trying to play catch up.
Yes, you're correct.
I think it's a great topic. It really makes us think about it. The pros, and I can see what you're saying, and even though we don't agree exactly, it doesn't make it any less fun to try and prove our point. And that's kind of what being nerdy is about.
Exactly. You all could think I'm insane and crazy, but you know what? I'll still have the discussion with you as long as it's fair and civil. That's all.
Yeah, as I said.
Well, thank you.
Sorry, MB, go ahead.
No. I don't mean to be.
No, I accidentally interrupted you.
Okay. No, yes. Exploration is always about the unknown. You have to make your choices. You have to make your decisions. That's all it is. And it's, it's always going to be different. One person could go to one island, see the people there. One person could go to the same island, see same people there, and think completely different. It's just how it is.
Yeah, but you see, what I'm looking at and I'm thinking is, I think it would have turned out differently if humanity had been visited first by the Andorians. Now, I have a bit of an out there theory. Okay?
A theory?
I will punch you in the eye, Bionic. So I have a theory. God damn it.
Oh my God.
She's making me hear my own words. She's bullying.
Can I please buy a belly button?
Mm-hmm.
You have such a cute voice. I'm so glad I finally got to hear it.
Well, thank you very much.
You are such a sweetie.
Okay, so just getting away from NB hitting on Bionic. Anywho, I'll slip you her cell number later. Anyway.
Oh, stop it.
Oh dear God.
Excuse me. No.
This is the hookup past.
No, he was joking. He was joking.
I'm only messing, man. I'm only messing.
I'm sorry. No, you don't. No, that's not funny to me. No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
You don't say something like
then.
Well, anyway.
Okay.
So I have a theory that this is in a different timeline. Right? So you remember Generations?
Right.
That Generations has caused Enterprise to go into a different timeline. Because we had the Borg attack on Earth. Right? You remember that? And then after that, so after that, we get Enterprise, which is kind of behind. Okay, but Enterprise looks different and has different technology, and it stated different weapons than in TOS. Because in TOS, they stated that during the Romulan War, they were using atomic weapons. Now we know for a fact that they were using photonic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and after that, hold on. I would like to welcome to the panel, Marcus.
Hey, Marcus, how's it going?
Hey, Marcus, you got any ideas?
Bionic. How's it going?
Hi, Marcus.
Oh, hail, Marcus Ghost.
Yes.
So, Marcus, you have some ideas of your own on Enterprise. Please go ahead.
Oh, yeah. No, just just some thoughts about Enterprise. I've
That's what we're
actually,
talking about.
yeah. Wow, funny enough. Hey, I guess I joined at the right time. But yeah, because the thing is, if you to get on that point that you were just making a little bit ago, if you watch the original Star Trek movie, they talk about the first Enterprise, and it looks nothing like the NX class. Personally, I actually believe that theory that the NX series spawned off of the Generations timeline, which altered the original TOS timeline.
Yes.
And kind of accelerated humanity's technological progression because they had Borg tech they could salvage, and they had some people had firsthand experience with the Enterprise D. No,
Wait,
Yeah.
no, that's
the
not
Enterprise
Generation.
E,
That's first
right?
Can I go into my bit
First
of a
contact. That's what I'm
convoluted
talking about.
theory? Okay.
Okay.
And then you can tell me what you think. So we have the people who were killed during the original Enterprise, during the original attack, right? Then let's say some of those people who were going to maybe push the ideas in a different way. Oh, maybe we don't need that idea, that technology. We don't need it. That's to whatever. Oh, maybe if we actually create this, are dead. They're gone, right? So
Mhm.
then Enterprise goes into its own, and after the Xindi attack on Earth, and after we got our asses handed to us, after the Romulan War, where we've seen cloaking technology far before we saw it in TOS, I think that militarized and battle-hardened people led on to Discovery. So I think Enterprise and Discovery are actually in the same timeline, and they're actually in a separate timeline to the rest of the show.
Well,
I'm not sure about that.
I don't know, because remember in Into Darkness when the Admiral's talking to Kirk and Spock, and you see the various ships, you see the NX class there.
Yeah, but that's because
So that would mean that the JJ verse is also linked to Enterprise as well.
Yes, and I'm convinced of that as well, because the JJ verse is a split as well.
There's too many
The
damn
JJ
splits
verse.
here, okay?
No, I know that.
It's not healthy.
I know.
So yeah, and that's that's my big thing, is that because when I think of Earth and NX timeline, and NX time zone, we'll call in that time, I would think Earth would have a small space station that could dock 1 or 2 ships. They'd have some maybe orbital defense platforms, have a fleet of 15 ships of varying sizes, be an actual spacefaring people to where they go to maybe a few star systems outside the Sol system, for trade and everything like that.
Okay, I absolutely agree with you. Sorry, I'm just focused on something for a second, but go ahead. I absolutely agree with you on this.
I agree with you too. I think it's smart to just have everything perfect before you venture into something. I think that's smart and it's wise and it's what we all want. But
yeah, well, and that's my thing. I like flushed out stuff, and I know that it maybe in that moment when they were writing the show, they didn't think of this stuff.
I think they did think about it, because there are moments in the show that essentially kind of hint at humanity being very unprepared. Like the theme of the show is humanity kind of, bit off more than they could chew.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh no, I agree. And
I don't know. I think what happened with the whole jumping in a bit early thing, because you have your theories about alternate universe Star Trek and stuff. But think of what's presented in Enterprise, you have the Vulcans who are essentially trying to groom humanity, right? That's basically what they're trying to do. They're trying to inject their philosophy into humanity to make them mini Vulcans before they let them off into the world, because they don't like how brash and all this other stuff, how ruled by emotions we are, et cetera, et cetera. So you have humanity, which, is chafing under that, yearning to get out. But you also have the Vulcans who are giving them essentially a cleaned out sandbox to play in, right? When it comes to their little area of space, right?
Yes.
And humanity doesn't know how dangerous the galaxy actually is, right? The first time they meet anyone who's even remotely hostile to them is one guy who crash lands on their planet from the Klingon Empire brain.
Yes.
Right? So they're basically going under the assumption that, yeah, space is likely going to be a little dangerous. They assume space is going to be dangerous, but they don't know, right? And the Vulcans haven't even shown their full hand, so they don't even know how powerful the Vulcans truly are. Maybe they think 5, 6, 7 ships, 5 of them being warp deltas. Maybe they think that's all they need for their entire civilization, right? And so they know they're kind of going a bit ahead of schedule, but they don't really realize how deep the pool is until they step into it, right? After that point, they realize, holy shit, we need a lot more than we got, right? But at that time, they were just thinking, we'll just go, swim offshore a little bit. What's the worst that can happen, right?
Yeah, and well, and something that I was just thinking of while my damn Wi-Fi is, going on the fritz. What a shock there. Something I was thinking about is that when the Vulcans said that they didn't tell the humans about the Klingons, I think the reason why is because they knew at the present level of technology humanity was at, the Klingons would look at humanity as a thing to conquer or defeat. They knew humanity was not ready to meet the Klingons because they knew the Klingon ways. So I think in a way, the Vulcans were holding Earth back because they wanted them to truly be able to step out onto the galaxy and not have to be reliant on them. They were taking the cautious route. Which
I do
nothing is bad. I'm just saying I think that's the logic of why the Vulcans were doing what they were doing, because they're like, look, there's races out there that could pummel you guys into an oblivion and level your planet in a day that you haven't even met yet that we do, but we're not going to tell you about them because you're going to think, oh, we can just be peaceful and nice, when this race doesn't believe in being peaceful and nice.
So the Vulcans are basically like our government right now, and they're trying to control the information that we have and censor what we do and say and think.
Bionic, out of respect, please do not get me going.
A little close to home.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No. I
Dark Raven has God, Emperor of Earth.
we will not go down that road.
The thing is, DSA, I agree with you, and that's kind of part of the point I was making, in that they did keep us in the dark so much. We didn't know how dangerous how dangerous the galaxy was because the Vulcans didn't tell us, right? And they didn't tell us because they thought it would be better for us.
Yeah.
Right?
And also, I am also 100% convinced that Vulcan database was heavily edited.
Oh yeah,
it had to be, because then they would know. They would have known about the Klingons.
Yeah,
I mean, in one episode, guys, do you remember how happy Archer was when he's like, "Hold on," and T'Pol's like, "Yes, this star does not appear on any star charts that I'm aware of." And so you're telling me that this star in this star system is not on the Vulcan maps yet, and him and Chip just like slap the console and they're like, "Yes, we have discovered something that the Vulcans didn't know."
They censored their records?
Yeah. Like we censored Sammy by doing this.
But yeah. No, I mean, I think that's all but stated verbatim in the show, is that the Vulcans censored. They removed the bits that they thought were like too tempting or too dangerous or whatever, and they didn't want to give humans more than they could chew. Yeah. Just giving them the database in the first place was a huge hassle. So of course they were going to give them a censored version of the database. Not to mention the full database likely wouldn't even fit on early Starfleet computer systems. Right?
Yeah. You were saying, BB?
Why did the Vulcans step in and kind of? I mean, I feel like it says a lot about the Vulcans in a good way, a positive way, that they it seems like they were trying to take care of the human species. They didn't destroy it. They were trying to cultivate allies, perhaps, but
so
not
they
very
said
powerful.
in the episode that CSA was saying earlier, the Vulcans are as furious as the most bloodthirsty Klingon. They're as loyal as an Andorian. They've got the logic of a Vulcan. They're as stubborn as a Tellarite. And then the next minute they just turn around and they show complete and utter logic of a Vulcan. And they said they've never seen any other species like humanity. And to be honest, we scare them.
Scare or intrigue?
We scare them.
They said the word scare.
We're unpredictable. You never know what we're going to do.
So why did they take it upon themselves to kind of help us?
Okay, so I think myself, because in season, is it 3 or 4, guys? The one with no, it's season 4 it is. So in season 4 Bionic, they go to this planet and they go back in time and they see the ancient Vulcan Sirach, right? And get his teachings. And Sirach is Vulcan Jesus.
Right.
So when they're there, you see him in the time when Sirach died, he turns around and he looks and there's explosion and they're like, what is it? There's a war going on. Oh, those who fly beneath the raptor's wings. That's the Romulans, right? And he said, those who fly beneath the raptor's wings, we're in a war with them. And yeah, so I think that the Vulcans still remember the Romulans at this point in their life. They still remember what happened with the Romulans. And I think they're scared of humanity doing that again. Because you have to remember, Archer is a captain, and he only got promoted just before the first episode of Enterprise. Like maybe, I'd say, 2 months beforehand. And before that, they had just broken the Warp 2 barrier a few years before. So they'd gone from a Warp 2 ship that fell out of the Warp Tunnel to create a Warp 5 ship that can go out into space in a matter of 10 years.
So their technology is progressing quickly, and they want to keep their eye on it. So they so they pose kind of as allies, but it's almost like a Sandra Feliciano said it best. It's like a helicopter parent almost. It seems like they were showing them some tough love. And
it's hard to truly lock down the Vulcans in terms of their true intentions, because I've got several theories as to why.
Yeah.
But
we'll go into those in 2 seconds, CSA, because if you remember, guys, they said that Paul was on Earth and it's like, did you see the Grand Canyon? No, I never left the compound. My theory is, why didn't they leave the compound? Like, they were scared. Now, they were also, how am I going to put this lightly and stay within the algorithm? People who did not like people, so they make things go boom. Right? So they hated they basically hated non-humans, right? And they show up later after early season 4 when humanity gets back to Earth. They're like, yeah, you're welcome to drink here. He's not talking about Dr. Phlox, who saved humanity more times than not. And then they just basically outright lost after that. This group. And,
I know which group you're talking about.
I'm just trying not to say the actual what they are. Just.
Well, they're.
No algorithm, dude.
Well.
I know. It's a pain in the hole sometimes.
No. I'm not talking about the algorithm. I'm just trying to word it right. They're basically just. I mean, I don't think this. I mean, if the algorithm don't like this, then the algorithm's really effed up. But they're basically just like.
Say it, dude. I'm the tiny channel. The algorithm don't care. Go ahead.
They're basically humanity first.
Yes. Okay.
That's what they were. Humanity first. Every other alien race is
I don't think they were in second.
inconsequential.
I think that they were. You also have to see it from their point of view. The people on Earth, not the Enterprise, right? The people on Earth have seen their technology being subjugated by this advanced race, the Vulcans, since 2066, right? Then they lost 7 million people when the Xindi attacked, and they nearly lost everything again because that bomb got close to Earth, too close for comfort for them. They had to set out their second ship, which lost people on it, so they've lost more people. And then Dr. Phlox comes down, and the Denobulans are arrogant enough, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we've been at war." They've heard the stories of Enterprise, and I'm pretty sure people working in Starfleet have been like, "Oh yeah, the Enterprise came up against the Andorians. They're the Andorian Empire." The problem, what they're scared of, is you keep the Imperial Andorians, the Klingon Empire. They're scared that we're going to be annexed. We've got nobody at this point to back us up, and they're scared. They want to keep what they have and not lose anything.
Yeah, and that's something that I think should, and that's something you can fold into the larger universe. Is that the mentality of the average human as well? Because you can't look at it just from Starfleet's perspective. You have to think about it from the average human who, you had the Xindi attack. They've heard of the Klingon Empire and the Andorians, and maybe even the Romulans. Maybe, well, probably not the Romulans because they had a brief encounter with them, so that was probably like classified information. But like, I think humanity felt kind of desperate, and I think because after the Xindi, I feel like in a way humanity was really trying to prove itself that it could handle itself. Because at the end of that episode where they finally bring Sirach's teachings, the ambassador, ambassador and his colleague basically say that it's time for the Vulcans to stop holding you back, to get off your shoulders. And then Archer looks at them and says, "We're ready."
Hold on. You forgot, dude.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So, there's that scene. So, I think after that... You okay, bud?
Internet again. So
yeah.
I hate it.
I'm sorry.
I think...
It's... So, with that statement right there, Earth should have been able to handle itself. I'm not saying from a galactic-wide war, but they should have been able to take care of themselves better because you no longer have the Vulcans to help you out as often as they did. But they still weren't ready. They weren't.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like
but in a way
was in that line.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm saying I think human arrogance.
Yeah,
is
there's. Oh yeah, absolutely. It's the same thing when your 18-year-old kid says, "You know what? Fuck you, mom. I'm gonna go live on my own. I'm ready to be an adult," right? And it's like, I mean, maybe you are, maybe you aren't. You're probably not, but you're confident enough, and you're at the point where you're like, yeah, I'm ready. Like, I mean, we weren't, but
you make it work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not as if I think at that stage what really happened is after, I think that this new government, what we didn't see, what we should have seen and would have loved it, is that you see a Vulcan walking up the Starfleet command. You see, say, Trip there, and they're talking about the refits on the Enterprise, and he's like, "Hey, Tamar, what are you doing here?" He's like, I am here from the new, just say the new Central Command. Right?
Okay.
And he's like, I'm here from the Central Command. We have this for you. What is it? He goes, "It's what we've been holding back. The Central Command says, live long and prosper, and we hope for an alliance in the future." And Chip's like, "This is Tractor Beam. This is Warp 7. Get this onto the NX now.
start doing it, and then just cut a few years later, maybe you've given Archer a beard or show him as an admiral or something like that, and you see the Enterprise, and you just hear cruising speed, sir, cruising speed, Lieutenant, and he's like, yes, sir.
Yeah.
And just
So, oh, go ahead.
And then it's like you see him, and he's like, yes, sir, cruising out, warp 7. And Archer's there just with a smile on him.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead. Hold on. Go ahead, BB.
I'm sorry, my timing is just terrible.
Don't worry, BB. This is how life should
That's okay.
work.
Okay, thank you. I was going to ask how you guys think the show would have been different. Would it have been better or worse? How would it be different if we had waited until we were fitted with weapons and we had our own little mini fleet? And how would it have changed our exploration into space and how we interacted with different alien species?
I think, Marcus, you go first, CSA, and then me.
Okay. Well, I think that's what that was implying, is that the Vulcans were attempting to treat us less like children and more like equals. And there may have been some technology sharing and stuff that happens. I imagine that's the case because only a few years later, there's Warp 7 and stuff like that. So, like, it's plausible. But I think if humanity had done what Vulcan wanted them to do and what you suggested, and that they just waited and built up more, it would have been less like it would have been less like an exploration and more like a military scouting project, where everything's planned and you have these things and you have scouts go out and they report and they bring back and you build this map slowly as you expand out. It would have been less, I guess, yeah, it probably would have forced us to be more militaristic, right? In that we have to approach everything cautiously and carefully.
Marcus, look at the captain of the Columbia.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she was a lot more militaristic than Archer was.
Yeah, because she'd seen things that Archer kind of hadn't, and Archer had seen things that she hadn't. And so they brought their different perspectives to it. And I think if humanity had waited and built up slowly and then slowly started, safely exploring the universe, I think something would have been lost in that. And the DNA of Starfleet would have changed, Yeah,
CSA?
So I think if humanity had waited, let's say humanity waited another, let's just even say 10 years, I think that for them, their technology would have advanced more. I'm not saying it would have advanced radically, but I think they would have been able to sustain Warp 5 for longer periods of time. Weaponry would probably be a little more powerful. I'm not saying they would have had shields, but their whole polarization would have been able to much thinger. Like, I feel like, and they would have been able to build out the fleet more. And I'm not saying that it would have been like how Marcus is saying, where they would have been really militaristic. Because remember, Starfleet and the military were two separate things. Because when they went to the Xindi, Archer
had to get the Mako.
In general, they got the Makos from the military. So I think,
then doesn't that mean that Earth has military ships?
Again, we don't know. Again, it wasn't. That was something that was never specified. Now, maybe it would be the equivalent. Maybe the military was the equivalent of the army, and Starfleet was the equivalency of the Navy.
I think, from what you're saying, I actually think. I think this is actually a military ship. I know it. I think for the time period, I think that could have been a military ship.
I don't think there were military ships. I think, like what CSA was saying, it was more of an Army-Navy split than it was like here's the military and here's a NASA, right? Starfleet was kind of NASA-esque, but they were more...
Let's ask the two people here who served. Armchairs, BB, if you served, if the Army was living in the same universe as Star Trek, right? And the Navy was out in space, would the Army be flying their own version of starships?
Well, no. I mean, the Army might put troops on a naval starship. They wouldn't have they probably would not have much in the way of their own fleet.
BB, what do you think?
I agree. I mean, all the services play together, you know.
Yeah.
But they usually specialize in one thing or another.
Yeah, because if you look at, hang on one second.
Okay. So I'll go. While he's distracted by something exploding. So I think myself that if Enterprise would have waited and gotten the upgrades, I think that maybe yes, Enterprise would have had a bigger bite, but let's say that a ship with a bigger bite comes after some people. Like we meet the Klingons with a bigger bite, we meet the Suliban with a bigger bite. I think that the enemies who were fighting us would have gotten more power to fight us, and would have sent more ships after us. Because they're like, oh, this one ship can destroy, say, 3 ships at a time, or something like, or 2 ships at a time. So while they do, if they have a fleet and they send it together, they're like, oh, they're after laying down 10 keels. Okay, we need to get them in as soon as possible and shut their asses down. So
yeah, I kind of think that you might have a point on that. Does anyone else want to say anything first?
Sammy, you want to say anything?
Nope.
Armchair? CSA, you done exploding?
I don't think so.
Sorry, what was the question?
If in the time before, okay, since you're not really familiar, if in the time of Enterprise they had a bigger flight, far more advanced, what do you think would happen?
I mean, you mean if Earth had a better budget?
If Earth had a better,
more advanced.
Yeah, like say they had a better budget and they waited, because I actually think they pumped everything they had into the NX era.
Ultimately, do you think it would have affected the story a lot?
Yeah, it would have really affected.
I think they would have had a much more organized approach to exploration.
Yes, because in early episodes, Bionic Maxis, they turn around and they bring the dog onto planets where they don't know what's on it, they don't know the people there, they don't know the religions, they don't know anything. For all they know, that dog could have been seen as a snack or as a demon, right? Mm-hmm. And then they bring it on. I mean, if, for talk's sake, they didn't have a prime directive, they're like, oh yeah, they start squishing and killing bugs. Oh, also, Dr. Phlox outright kills an entire species.
Yeah. That happens.
Well, I mean, it was pretty ridiculous the way that they just kind of, they're like, oh, look, a new planet. Oh, it looks kind of like Earth. Let's go camping. I mean,
yeah.
It was just,
yeah.
It was just completely idiotic. I mean, come on. If you're smart enough to be an astronaut, you're smart enough to know not to do something like that.
Yeah.
Bionic, it's a ship of men. Let's be honest, we are stupid enough to do that.
It's going from the same people that looked at a female astronaut going to the moon and gave her 200 tampons and asked if that was enough for a week.
I'm sorry, what, Maxis?
Oh, you didn't know about that one? Okay.
No,
so,
I didn't know this.
So, thing was, there was a bunch of scientists that were like trained in all about this rocket science and such, and there was this female astronaut that was going, I think, to the moon at that moment.
Okay.
So the astronauts came together and got her like 2,000 tampons, like all strung together in a little thing, and asked her if that was enough for her period for a week trip.
Is it enough?
Well, it's more than enough. Yes.
There's
I don't know.
So you only use like
I think it was joke. Personally, I think it was a joke. I don't think they were.
I think if you need that many tampons, you might have a medical condition. You might need to seek help.
Right.
But I think CSA randomly started to explode when you never got to answer. What do you think Enterprise would have been like if they had waited?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, I got a phone call. So I think that Earth would have been a little bit more ready to actually venture out. Like, again, their technology might have not as been advanced in some ways, but at least they would have been better prepared to face whatever challenges. Like, their weapons would have all been working and installed. You know, they would have been able to sustain their warp factor 5 for a longer period of time than just, a few minutes. They were a lesser technological race than many of them out there, but the ship should have at least been a little bit more prepared, because a few weeks could have meant the world to the ship, in terms of.
But we've seen what a few months did with the Columbia. 3 years. We saw what 3 years did. Okay, the time between series 1 and series 3 is a bit skewed because series 3 takes place over 3 months.
How many months?
3.
How many years?
Series 1 is 1 year, series 2 is 2 years, and series 3 is 3 months.
And what do you have growing in your garden?
Grass.
I'm sorry.
That's what the kids are calling it these days.
Worth it.
For those of you who are watching, we're going to see what happens if you put a bionic belly button into the sun.
Okay, so Common Sense America.
Just for you, bionic 33 and a third.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, God.
So it would have been. So I think it seems like everyone's answer is that it would have been prettier, and they did go unprepared, but it wouldn't change the story that much. Is that kind of what I'm?
It would have actually changed the story in later things, because I personally think that the enemies who they did come across would have seen a stronger Enterprise, because I think they just saw Enterprise as being this weak little crap bucket, right? So they acted as such. But if they had seen, say, Enterprise coming out as strong as the Columbia, and then, which was a fully fitted out, kitted out NX class, which had a bite to it, if they had seen that coming at them, they wouldn't have said, "Oh, these are these dopes that are exploring." It would have been like, you know what? We're being invaded. Okay, fuck this shit. Let's grab the spoons. We're going to invade them back.
So that's kind of more into like the TOS kind of show, like where we were able to hold our own and have weapons, but still be peaceful.
Think of TOS but primitive, and you have the same idea.
Well,
that's what I'm saying. So Enterprise maybe was a good preliminary for.
Yes. Completely.
It would have made certain episodes much more interesting because, episode, I think it was either 2 or 3 when they're trying to get their torpedo targeting sensors ready. Like, for example, they come up against the enemy ship, but because the way the ships say it's the material of the hull or it's shielding or what have you, it's something to do with the enemy ship. Their torp sensors can't get a proper lock on it. Like, they can target an area, but they can't target the ship or a specific part of the ship. And then that's when Reed, during that battle, says, "Sir, I think I've got it. Permission to fire a torpedo," because he's finally able to align the sensors in a way to where he can actually target a spot on the ship. You can still do that, and it's not because the Enterprise torp sensors aren't aligned. It has to do with the enemy ship. So it still presents this issue, but it's not incompetence.
Right.
And you could have even had it maybe a while later, say a few episodes before that, you could have had them show that there's 3 sensors moving about, which are the targeting sensors, right? And you see someone, and there's this guy, and he's there, and he's drinking, right? And he's trying to impress the girl, and talking his language. And he takes these 2 circular discs, which are either CDs or whatever like that. They're just circular discs in his hand. And Reed is watching this guy, and he's like, And then he puts the discs together and really decides, I need to get back to the Enterprise. Because seeing those 3 discs going together, he takes them from being 3 sensors which are moving about to being 1 sensor which can now pinpoint more accurately. And then a few episodes later, because we hear him, what's Reed doing? He's fiddling with the targeting array. And then in that battle, like CSA said, you're like, sir, may I fire a torpedo? Because after every torpedo misses, he's like, fine, bring your enhancements online. And then you see the ship go, and then he's like, fire, and then the ship go, and hit exactly where they wanted it to hit.
Yeah, they're still, because again, they aren't as advanced as the Vulcans or many other races. But if the ship is functioning, you can still, certain episodes you couldn't do, like Silent Enemy where they don't have the phase cannon installed. You wouldn't be able to do that episode. But what it would give you the opportunity to do is maybe create other episodes that that showcase Enterprise being given different challenges, not just we didn't have this installed.
I'm sorry, man. Marcus, you can now post links in the chat.
Ah, cool. I was just trying to post an article thing that.
Guys, I'm sorry, I have to dip out here. I've got it.
Okay, thanks for joining us, Armchair.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Ron.
Always, man.
Cool.
And it's great being on with the rest of you guys.
Take care, man.
It was good to talk to you.
Absolutely, you too.
Yeah, it's good you being here.
What an awful person. I am sorry about that.
Fuck you. So yeah,
no comment. But yeah, I mean, so here's the thing, CSA. You're right? Obviously, if the Enterprise had waited 2-3 weeks, waited 2-3 months, installed everything in there, now they wouldn't have gotten as advanced as the Columbia, right? Because I don't think they would have thought that they would need to be that advanced, right? But they would have been slightly more prepared. But ultimately, it depends on, first of all, it depends on how long you're talking about waiting. If you're talking about waiting until everything's installed, right, then that's like a few weeks to a couple months. Or if you're talking about waiting potentially 10 years to get ready, right? That's
an entirely new class. 10 years skips the NX totally.
Mm-hmm. I think what happens if the Enterprise goes out more prepared is it changes the spirit of the voyage to be something different, right? Not necessarily worse, not necessarily bad, but it changes the kind of atmosphere of the voyage a bit. And if they're more capable and they get into more fights and they hold their own more often and all this stuff, I think what ends up happening is you do develop a slightly more militaristic aspect to Starfleet. Now, I'm not saying Starfleet would have become the Romulan Empire in 5 years, right? But I think if you inject that DNA in, especially this early on,
you would have gone
Starfleet.
I think
it would not have gone in their favor.
No, I also think that what you're talking about, we saw it somewhere, guys. We've already seen this outcome, but in a different era. The JJ verse. I know how we all feel, but I'm just saying, I think the JJ verse is Star Trek militarized. I think those ships and everything like that, I think that's what Marcus is saying. And we all know how much we hate the JJ universe, but that is Starfleet purely militarized. Because look at how many security and red shirts are on the JJ universe compared to how many science officers were in the original TOS show. We barely see any, and we have seen no science labs or anything like that. The Kelvin timeline is the militarized Starfleet, and we've seen the Admiral egging for war. Now, that Admiral who's egging for war, let's say he's 60 years old when Kirk is there, his dad would have served with Archer.
Mm-hmm.
But if he was born 60 years ago, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, I think you're right. I think because this is so early in the development of Starfleet, any little tiny thing could butterfly out to something much more, radical. I think if things like that had happened and the Enterprise had gotten into more fights and been more confident in their military aspect and all this stuff, you might see something more like the JJ Enterprise, where it's not totally unrecognizable, but it's different enough and it's more militarized, right?
I think so. I think I think maybe you're taking something I'm saying like the wrong way. I'm talking about. I'm using what was said in the show to make my point about how certain systems weren't. So we know that the ship was mostly ready. We know the two main things that literally entire episodes were written around was how their weapons were either not fully weren't even installed, or they weren't fully calibrated. I don't think if Enterprise had waited a few more months to be fully finished, made sure all systems were on board and calibrated and everything like that, it wouldn't have militarized them, because they'd still have to go out there with the same tech as they had in the show. So their sensors wouldn't have really changed. They still would have the grappling lines. Like, most of the show would have still played out the exact same way, because even the Klingons said, there's like one or two episodes where the Klingons even say, oh, their energy weapons are low powered compared to ours. So,
but here's the thing. What I'm trying to say is that them leaving when they did was important to more than just the technology they had installed on the ship. Them leaving when they did was indicative of the spirit of Starfleet at that time, right? And the kind of foolhardy attempt at what they were trying to do. If they wait and they exercise caution, that changes the spirit of the voyage, right? That changes how their mentality is when they leave, which affects what they do on their journey and affects everything going forward, right? It's like I said, the butterfly effect, right? You get a tiny change early enough in the timeline, and that leads to massive consequences later on.
Yes.
Right. So 80 years later, you're talking about a theoretically very different Starfleet, one that maybe doesn't do 5-year missions or anything like that, because, well, that's too dangerous. We have to exercise prudence, right? We have to be more cautious about this.
Yeah, like look at the JJ timeline, because in the JJ timeline, in Into Darkness, that is when they started the 5-year mission. Meanwhile, in TOS, they were already on it, and so they had just started to fly deep space 5-year missions in, I want to say, about 10 years after Kirk, usually, into his career. But at this point, Kirk was already a well-established captain. He was already doing this, doing that. And he'd already been an explorer. But in the JJ, they're warriors who were turned into explorers, instead of the other way around.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
All right, I didn't hear most of what you said there because.
Okay, I will restate it again. Pretty much, the JJ timeline, right? They had only started the 5-year missions in Into Darkness, okay? While in the first season of TOS, they were already on their 5-year mission. How far were they? Like 2.5 years into their 5-year mission or something like that in TOS?
I don't actually know that.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, BB, you watched TOS recently enough for you. Do you remember how far in they were?
I'm sorry, it cut out a little bit.
Do you remember how far into their 5-year mission they were on TOS?
I thought they were doing the beginning, kind of the first 3 years, because then there's a comic book that has the next 2 years, right?
So, okay, so they are already 3 years in when we meet them, right? So the first, let's say the first 3 seasons is a year. So the TOS season 1, they're just starting it. TOS season 2, they're year 2. TOS season 3, they're year 3.
That's how I interpreted it, yes.
Yeah. So while they're doing that, in years later, in the Kelvin timeline, that is when they only start a 5-year mission, and that's when we see Beyond is on their 5-year mission.
Mm-hmm.
So and that's militarized Starfleet. So Starfleet would not have cared about 5-year mission. All they would have cared about is defending their borders and sticking a gun up the Klingons' assholes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I mean, that's
I get what
kinda
y'all are saying. I do.
okay.
You know, I think it's a perspectives thing. Like, I don't think anybody's wrong. I think it's just a perspective thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think it would have been smart for them to wait a little bit of time. Yes, but the way the story was constructed,
Right.
when they did, was important, right? It was a plot point. It was a significant event that they left early, and it mattered to the story and the development of that entire season.
No, I know. No, I agree with that. No, and that's one thing. Like, the story was written. Like, I'm gonna argue with that. I think a big thing is that it's thinking about the larger scale, but I think that's what this whole discussion's been about, is that looking at the difference between the story that we were given and the larger scale of what could have been, and trying to compare the two. And the problem is, those two, to do that would mean you have to alter the story.
Yes.
And I'm not saying change the way Enterprise's story was. I just like theorizing. So that's why I brought up the whole, was Earth truly ready? Because it puts that little question out there of, okay, let's theorize. Was Earth truly ready? How could they have been more ready to enter the greater galactic scope?
Yeah, exactly. And with that, guys, we're going to end. So if you want, check the About section. You'll find the links to my Discord. Feel free to hop in, guys, and subscribe to Darth Revan and the Common Man Cast. I would like to thank Marcus, Armchair, NB Geeks, all the guests for showing up, and Bionic. Thank you so much. And we have Bionic here on her first ever live stream. I am so honored and proud.
My first ever sober live stream.
Well, damn it. Can somebody remember, guys, and just so you know, I'm going to start an OnlyFans, and for $150 a month, you can pay me to keep clothes on.
Oh my god. Oh, thank you for having me here. I had a lot of fun. It was great talking with you guys.
Dear God, that's a thought I did not need.
So, guys,
yes, definitely about it.
Since this is a Star Trek stream, I'm going to say to everybody out there in the chat, thank all of you for coming here. Matt, Sandra, Poe, good to see you, man. Haven't seen you in a while. Hit me up on Twitter. And all of you dorks out there, live long.
Jail again?
No, not yet. Not yet.
I'll give it a few minutes.
Yeah, actually, I'm on my 7th account now. So
that's horrifying.
All right. So, guys, live long and prosper.